Good evening to all our listeners. We really apologize for starting 30 minutes late. It's been due to a technical glitch, but we are glad that we are here and that we are ready for the final spaces for the conversation around menstrual hygiene. And it's coming exactly 2 days after the commemoration of the International Menstrual Hygiene Day, which happened on 28th of May. So today we're having conversations around the law. And I should say, before we get into the conversation, that it is close to 8 years since we as a country committed to ensuring that menstrual hygiene products are provided to school-going girls. And this promise was made by our dear government around 2016-2021 in the NRM manifesto. And the objective was really to address the rates of school dropouts that were happening at that time and support menstrual hygiene, dignity, and well-being of adolescent girls in primary and secondary schools. Indeed, when we speak about menstrual hygiene, it's important to note that menstrual education is a vital aspect of adolescent health education. And it's a tool to empowerment of the girls and women to realize their full potential in education, in employment, and livelihood. So your host today will be Noor Nachibuka Musisi, and I'll be speaking to the gurus in the area. You're listening from Mr. Semakula Henry Musoke, who is a principal education officer with the Ministry of Education and Sports. Mr. Semakula, it's always a pleasure to have you, and most importantly, on today's topic. We'll also have Mr. Seth Nimwesiga, who is a lawyer and a specialist in police advocacy, working with the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development. We'll also have Calvin Mochibi, Mr., who is a young person, but also a champion of menstrual hygiene in the university, which is Makerere University. So as we speak about menstrual hygiene management, we need to note that you cannot delink it from the right to health, especially in a country like Uganda, where we focus on the ability of citizens to access healthcare services for the betterment of their lives and livelihood. And when we speak about the right to health, you cannot delink it from other underlying determinants. And perhaps it's the reason that we are having voices today from the Ministry of Education, because access to menstrual products is directly linked to the right to education and the ability of the students and pupils to attend class and study. We have noted in the past that menstruation is natural. It is not a forced issue. So when we don't speak about it and the need to have the menstrual products, the need to ensure that some norms and cultures that are progressive are spoken about, the need to ensure that there's no stigma around it, it affects the well-being of women. So today, we're going to talk messes from a legal perspective. So I'll call upon you, if you have not already, to please follow us today. Our hashtag is Let's Talk Menses with capital L, capital T, and capital M, and follow us at Sehad, Uganda. So I'll start with Mr. Semakula.
Yes, please.
We have been having conversations in Tesco and Karamoja regions, and we've been engaging with State of Foundation and TAD, and the district leadership there. And we have noted that there's a lot of stigma and discrimination, poverty, and school dropouts amongst the children, the pupils, the students in Karamoja and Teso regions. And the major cause is gender-based violence and lack of menstrual products. So we've been posing a question on whether the Ministry of Education
Hey, it's Sumuruzu.
has
Lady,
put in place.
where's the key? Okay. Yes, please proceed. Sorry for the interference.
We've been asking ourselves, having seen the rate of school dropouts in Karamoja and Teso regions, whether the Ministry of Education has put in place any policies to support school going to fully perform their menstrual roles in areas such as Karamoja and Teso. Over to you, Mr. Semakola.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much.
Mr. Semakula, we don't seem to hear you. Hello? Mr. Semakula? Okay, let's try to look out for Mr. Semakula. In the meantime, we'll pose the questions for Mr. Semakula, and I'll get into a conversation with Mr. Seth Nemwesiga to kind of help us paint a picture on how the law and policy environment on menstrual hygiene management in Uganda looks like. Over to you, Seth. Seth?
Yes, please. Please confirm if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Yeah? All right, great. So thank you so much, and thank you for the effort to have all of us here and for having this timely conversation as we celebrate this crucial month and day for ladies, our sisters. Yesterday, I had a conversation with my colleague as I was being invited to have a conversation around the policy environment on menstrual health. That why specifically did you choose men? And she had the honor to remind me that it is really our role, it is really everyone's role to ensure and to that issues that affect either a woman or a man are handled together. So I appreciated it from the perspective that we have had a series of conversations in this campaign, and I think we called this one a grand finale. And they found it important that we should have men talking about menses, which is unique but also interesting. That said, it is absurd. It is absurd that we have. It is both absurd but also, encouraging that we have to have this conversation, because definitely from where we stand, it is not a beautiful picture or a beautiful situation. As some of you might have been following the discussions, the issues that are affecting girls, especially in the rural areas that we work in, or wherever you stand, you probably see this or experience it at a personal level. You know that we have this conversation because we have had a difficult situation, especially for the girls and women. Now, the menstruation, we all know that it's not a choice. I mean, by virtue of the fact that you are female, you are condemned to this for a period of time in your life cycle. It is not a choice, but then the people that we have given the power, which is the government, to sort of make it easy for us are, posing all sorts of excuses. I would have loved to listen in from Mr. Semakula first, although that digital world will not allow at the moment. But every female we know that has to endure this life cycle, or this part of her life, enduring menstrual pains, for a government that should be setting up policies or setting up the environment to make it easy, to make it bearable, instead is discussing how to look at menstrual products and tax them and make it beneficial, make it, in other words, commercializing a very personal problem, a problem that touches to the dignity and rights of women. And I'm glad that Nur talked about the promises that are made in the manifestos, etc. And those campaign promises, always very kind and very concerned about the issues. But when it comes to addressing them, then it becomes a challenge. It becomes a case of pulling ropes here and there, discussing taxation, discussing accessibility, discussing human rights and the interconnectedness, as if really we are talking to people who have no clue about the challenges that are faced. Well, without extending that rant much further, I'll just maybe slightly highlight the policy framework that we have, and I will invite my colleague Calvin to shed more light once I have had to say what I have to say. So, in Uganda, all our policies really emanate from or start from the Constitution, and we must be reminded that when we talk about the Constitution, we are talking about the supreme law of the land. This is a very, very selfish document, and in itself provides for its supremacy under the first foundational articles, specifically Article 2, says that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and anything inconsistent with the Constitution is illegal or shall be deemed invalid to the extent of its inconsistency. So this Constitution has several parts, but I'll paint a picture on the first part, which we call the national objectives and directive principles of state policy. This part of the Constitution, until recently, was looked at just guidelines. Otherwise, the constitutional mandatory provisions are called articles. For those who may have not had a chance of reading the Constitution in detail, we have the articles which give provisions of the Constitution. What does the Constitution say? What does the Constitution provide? But before the articles, there is what you may call like the SHAPU, or the introductory part, which is called the National Objectives and Directive Principles of State Policy. Now, these principles really guide, like we have had, state policy. And I'll just go through some of them. They mandate, first of all, the state to ensure that there is respect of fundamental rights of all Ugandans in social justice and economic development. And as we talk about this, I would wish that everyone really thinks about it in terms of that young girl or yourself probably experiencing these challenges.
Seth?
Yes, please. I'm able to hear you. I don't know whether you can hear me. Are you able to hear me? Okay, someone gives me a
Yes,
thumbs up.
yes,
So,
I can hear you.
okay. Yes, I was really urging that as we talk about the policy environment, and you will allow me to be a little detailed, but because we must understand what our laws provide, so we can know whether to advocate for more or to just be comfortable. So that when we are doing the advocacy, whether on social media or radio talk shows, etc., we know that we actually have backing in the black letter of the laws and policies that govern the direction of our country. So I was talking about the need to look at some of these laws in the lens of that young girl or ourselves facing the challenges or the effects of menstruation in access and the interconnected challenges. So I talked about socioeconomic development, and in particular, the government is mandated to direct efforts, and by directing it means it has to be deliberate in directing efforts to ensure maximum social and cultural well-being of all people. So I'll not even elaborate that, because what is well-being of all people really? If someone has to, I attended one of the series of the conversations and someone talked about an experience of a girl who was using sand in a polythene bag to cover up for a menstrual hygiene product, like a pad, really. What is the well-being of such a girl and the environment within which they live? And then under that very provision of socio-economic well-being, all Ugandans have the right to enjoy opportunities and access to education, to health services, to clean and safe water, etc. So is that girl accessing clean and safe water? Yesterday I looked at a recent report that showed that the unmet need for the government's water and environment related programs is about United States dollar 1.7 billion annually. I mean, that is the amount of money annually that we are not allocating sufficiently to provide for water and environment related programs. And we know, of course, I cannot elaborate further, but it has also been discussed in detail before. The need for water, the importance of water and sanitation as a program, but in response to menstrual hygiene issues. We also had a group of activists stating, I think this was through a clip, I tried to look up a few things from what is happening outside the policy, stating that over 80% of the water taken at domestic level is contaminated. Yeah. I mean, if we have the right to save water resources, but the water we are taking is contaminated, what does that mean for, that girl who needs that water to, clean up and stay on, be included within the environment in which they live, like school, like at home, so as to, cope up and with this and avoid the stigma that comes along, etc. And so these are some of the issues that really need government's attention. But I'll just go on to the next policy. I mean, the Constitution is very elaborate, and I may not go through all the provisions, but it recognizes the role of women. It recognizes the need for the state to afford equal opportunity for everyone, including girls, to the highest attainable standard of education. It recognizes the need for taking practical measures to promote a good water management system, etc. I've already talked about the need for water, but also crucially, what I picked out from the national objectives is the issue of accountability. I mean, all these public offices are held in trust of the people, and that is the provision of the Constitution. And all persons in these positions, like Mr. Semakula we are with here today, has the responsibility to be answerable for what is missing when we are talking about policy. I mean, are we looking at policy as the solution? Are we legislating our way to sustainable development? And that takes me to sustainable development goals, but I will probably not discuss them in further, but I'll just highlight the menstrual hygiene charter developed in 2015 by government. This was something, as if a promise to, to recognize that menstrual hygiene is really crucial in setting the wellness and well-being of women and girls. But then this charter is as good as it stayed. It's probably, if it was printed, it's probably catching dust somewhere in someone's office. We've not seen programs come up to, implement the charter. It has very specific and few provisions. But I try to look up what government has done in terms of, operationalizing that charter, and it's not there. It's really not there. And maybe that's a question we are going to pose to Mr. Semakula. In other countries like Kenya, it's very enviable to look at. They have something like the menstrual hygiene management strategy. I mean, that is something very achievable. And why are we not having something like that? They have a strategy that, elaborates everything to do with creating an enabling environment for menstrual hygiene, things to do with breaking the silence on menstruation, stuff to do with safe and hygienic management, disposal of menstrual waste, and stuff like that. But yeah, sorry, I was getting a distraction. But we have a charter that directed us to come up with something like that, but we've not prioritized it. I mean, what is that? And I'm glad, Nuru, you talked about the interconnectedness of menstrual hygiene with other human rights, whether it's the rights of women, the rights to a clean and healthy environment. All these are fundamental rights provided for in our Constitution. The right to education, privacy. We all know what menstruation does to privacy. We all know what it does to dignity and discrimination, especially in school settings. And of course, that affects education as well. It's an emergency. I don't know why we have not made menstrual products essential commodities, for example, in our health systems. Instead, we are looking at them as, opportunities for income generation through taxation, etc. I was combing the tax laws. There were cries about overtaxation of menstrual products and making them unaffordable through a proposal by, I don't remember her name, but it was very disheartening that this was a proposal by a woman saying that that pads, that sanitary towels should be, taxed, because in her wisdom, they were used by LGBTQ persons. She ignored a whole constituency of women and girls in this country and instead tried to achieve popularity, because apparently that's the hot cake, especially in the political spaces. It seems that if you do not scapegoat LGBTQ, you probably don't have ears. You're not listened to enough. So I tried to comb the tax laws to look at whether such an absurd proposal had found its way into the excise duty and the restricted products that are taxed for purposes of making them undesirable or unaffordable. But I'm glad Parliament didn't, bow to the whims of the forces, the invisible forces, and I've not seen it there. But still, it is not. It's not free. It's not free to buy pads, and I've already mentioned that menstruation is not a choice. In the last space we had, someone said, why do we have to give out condoms for free when sex is free and sell pads when menstruation is not a choice? Imagine something like that, food for thought. So I thought I would paint that picture, but aside from the laws, I would like to also highlight, Noor, that we have institutions. And maybe I may not go to elaborate about the role of each, but just for information that for every right I've mentioned, whether it is a clean and healthy environment, there's an institution for it, there's an MDA for it, there's a duty bearer for it. Whether it is education, I'm glad we have a representative here. Whether it is
And
health,
that's
we
what I
have the
want to
minister.
bring in. Say. Thank
Yes.
you. I really want to pause you to get into education, especially that you're speaking about line ministries that are responsible for all the rights that you've been speaking about. I also want to make mention that you actually started off by saying that each of the policies that we have within the different sectors emanate from the Constitution. And you really
Yeah.
provided us an interlinkage between the right to health and education. And I want to bring in Mr. Semakula. Why? Because the things that we're speaking about are things that not just for civil society, but also government. So it would be nice to know. I have been trying to do some bits and pieces of reading about menstruation and the laws and policies, and I take note of the fact that in 2014, we developed, together with the Ministry of Education, the National Strategy for Girls' Education, which was a 2015-2019 policy. And from that, partners supported, again, the ministry developed a charter specifically on menstruation. But we also know, Mr. Semakula, that while we are with these 2014-15 legislations, we also have a 14-year-old policy that perhaps should be coming
Oh,
in
why have we
at
gone
this
quiet?
time to support with this. Mr. Semakula, we are there. Are you hearing me? Am I clear? Hello?
We hear you, Miss Noor. We hear you.
Thank you. So at the same time, I was saying that we have a policy that is been almost 14 years in the offing that should be supporting us as a country to really specifically speak about menstruation from a strategy policy kind of view, and that's the National School Health Policy that we have not been seen anywhere. So I wanted to ask Mr. Semakula, with a 2015-2019 National Strategy for Girls' Education, plus the Charter on Menstruation, and without a National School Health Policy, and we know that we must work to create a conducive social menstrual hygiene environment to allow girls to be in school. What could the Ministry of Education have done to support teachers, to support learners and communities to implement their responsibility? Because we don't have a national school health policy yet. We also don't have the strategy that we have is kind of there but a bit old. So what could the ministry have done, Mr. Semakula? Mr. Semakula, are you with us? I think we have, okay, he's here. Mr. Semakula? Mr. Semakula, over to you. Okay, he's muted. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. So we're asking really what the ministry has done.
Disturbing. The ministry is doing quite a number of
It,
things. I want to begin with what is happening
please.
today and tomorrow. We as ministry have organized a national WASH symposium. WASH meaning water, sanitation and hygiene. And that workshop, that symposium, has been made an annual event. And it draws membership and participation from all players around school, water, sanitation and hygiene, including players on issues of menstrual hygiene. I would quickly inform you that there are about 30 partners in that engagement, including but not limited to GIZ, USNet, WaterAid, Water Mission, Water for Life, CI, UDI, IRC, SMAVI, PEAS, Ministry of Health is there, Ministry of Water, Environment is there. The key thing is to discuss more and look for solutions together. Because as it is clearly shown, the challenge of menstrual hygiene cannot, for learners in schools, cannot only be for the Ministry of Education. That is one. But two, or maybe to conclude that symposium is supposed to be an annual event. It started last year. All the participants are there, but most interesting also is that we are co-organizing this symposium with the Parliamentary Forum on Water, Sanitation and Hygiene. And what came out today mainly was also around, from Parliament, was also around the need to really even revise the law on menstrual funding, because it seems like there's a challenge when it comes to schools. For example, UPE and USE, they're not supposed to charge any extra fees for anything extra that would be meant maybe for menstrual hygiene infrastructure and so on. So that is one identification that was there. But quickly, at what else has ministry done? We are across board working with partners, even outside this symposium. We, for example, are members of the Period Equality Network, and we have different forums, including Twitter and WhatsApp, where there are engagements on a daily, updating each other on what is happening in different institutions. We, as a ministry, have what we call basic requirements and minimum standards, and this happens to be part of the legal system anyway, that wherever institutions are being established, there are certain must-haves for that institution, especially in terms of infrastructure. And the key for our discussion under infrastructure, how many stances for girls, how many stances, toilet stances for boys. There are limits, but also what is the ratio of the stances to the school population? What is the ratio of the stances to the girls? And why more emphasis on girls? Because we know their use of the toilet is extended by the menstrual hygiene field. Otherwise, the boys will use quickly and go, the girls need more. Through the BRM, we are also emphasizing the idea of school inspection, and this is done by our Department of Inspection, the Directorate of Education Standards. Wherever they've gone down to check on schools, they're really keen at inspecting the wash facilities, confirming the existence of soap, water, and any other issues, including incinerators. Important also to our talk now is that as a ministry, we are fighting hard to ensure that the boy is involved. The boy and the gentleman out there are involved in. Hello?
Hearing you, Mr.
that
Semakula. We're hearing you.
the boy is involved in the discussions of menstrual hygiene. It is unfortunate that the idea of reusable sanitary pads is not really rhyming well with even Minister of Health. It doesn't really buy in. But what had made us go there is because of the vulnerability of our girls. You go down to the districts you've mentioned, like Karamoja. Somebody has never gotten 3,000 for a full week to feed the family. How do they get 3,000 to buy a pad? So in the field of, in the atmosphere of vulnerability, we thought we would support them in making the reusable, and we did lots of training. But what seems to be coming up is that the minister is not very friendly to that proposal. And that's why we are now looking at many other alternatives, including working with partners to ensure that the standards of the pads are also done well. We are working with UNBS.
Are you, Mr. Semakula? We seem to have lost you at the partners we are engaging. Okay. So,
Why not?
Mr. Semakula,
I see myself on. What is wrong?
yes, we can now hear you.
Okay, let me even just try to conclude all that I had because I'd also planned an engagement at 6. So I was mentioning our working with even UNBS to ensure that the standards of pads out there that go out to our schools are okay. We are also trying to understand new products on the market, like, for example, the menstrual cup. And we have been engaging with organizations like Umena who have been advocating for this. We have support from Global Fund, for example, to help vulnerable girls in specific districts. And we have distributed pads for use by the vulnerable girls. But we have also distributed pads for emergency at school level. We have also really worked a lot on issues of training, retraining the teachers to make them also have a lot of information on SRH related to menstrual hygiene. So we have developed the National Menstrual Hygiene Training Manual for primary, but also another manual for secondary. Many of the people in this forum must have come across our menstrual hygiene management reader, a very simple version to simplify the subject of menstruation, even to the first person to understand this. We've engaged in a lot of routine assembly messaging, but also dialogues. I've moderated about 4 dialogues at district level, and the key area of discussion has been menstrual hygiene. Challenge though is that we still have many other areas that think this is a subject for the bedroom, this is a subject for women, you shouldn't bring it to the public. Very unfortunate, but we are trying to bring them on board. The issue of incinerators not to overemphasize and so on. But I should also mention, Madam Nolu, that we have challenges, and I know these are challenges that everybody is facing. Challenges around mindset. Why should a man? I went to train women in Kitgum on menstrual hygiene, and they kept waiting for the trainer to be, they expected the trainer to be female. The understanding was all that this is a subject for only women. The issue of water coverage across the regions is really unfortunate. When you go to some of our refugee camps, we have schools there, but everybody is fighting for resources. Water in the ghetto. I had council there mention some water in certain areas is very contaminated. You could say the area has water, but which type of water is somebody going to use? Issues of the dry areas, and when you mention Karamoja, it is really very clear. A person can walk for several kilometers just to fetch water for menstrual hygiene, and it's all this cuts across. But the issue of norms is really still very strong because it again ends up even affecting disposal. Council also talked about disposal. You find people who can never throw the used pad in an incinerator, possibly because culture demands that when you throw it there, then you are burning your children. There are those issues that have come up, but also issues around inconsistent knowledge and maybe expense of products. But then, what is my call, especially to civil society listening in here, and the general call to action by whoever is a player on menstrual hygiene? I would really begin by calling upon.
Mr. Semakula, before we get there briefly, I took note of the fact that we have a meeting. We really want to appreciate you. However, we have been running this session for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
One of the things that came through was the fact that the age at which girls get sexual reproductive health education might be alarming when it comes to menstruation. And we want to find out from you how this can be addressed. So, because menstruation starts as early as 10, 11, yeah? And you 10, 11, 12, and you must speak to this person about what they should expect. So we really wanted to find out from you.
Okay. Yes, you rightly said that
How
menstruation
we can
is as early.
address.
Hmm. So
Yes, so just
menstruation
to find
begins.
out how we can address this.
Okay. I would say that menstruation begins as early as 10, 11, as you've indicated, but in certain circumstances, it even begins earlier because the way young people are growing these days is also very disturbing. You don't be surprised to find one of 8 and 9 also menstruating even before the so-called age of menarche or the teenage age. So those should also be taken into concern. But the question is, when should we begin talking to our daughters, to the girls about the menstruation issue? Well, we are encouraged. We are encouraged to talk to them at an appropriate age. And our sexuality education framework provided the appropriate age levels. and also provided key topical areas for the different levels. If I remember very well in the framework, the subject of menstrual hygiene comes out strongly at upper primary, because this is the expected age when the girls are really getting there. They are teenagers. They're already getting into their menarche and they're experiencing menstruation. So they must know the practices around it. They must know what it means to them. They must know the health around it. They must know when to consult and what to consult. They must also know how to be ready for the period in case it just comes, to avoid embarrassment and all that. So our proposal is upper primary, which is actually 10 years plus. Otherwise, we are also aware that young people today will find information in all corners of the world. Even when we have not produced it in class, they'll find their own way of understanding it. If they find it, maybe no big deal. Otherwise, for us, according to the growth span and growth stage, teenage age is actually the age at which we feel this subject should seriously be introduced, and then it goes all the way. I know that there are people who assume that older people understand the menstruation so much. You may be disappointed when you go to, for example, women above 40, and they are closed in. This is a subject they don't want to discuss. They know so little all about themselves. When you tell them about issues of norms and all that, they really don't know what happens elsewhere. On that note, Hajat Noor, my dear daughter, allow me to simply call upon everybody who can play a part. And when we say everybody, it's not only government. We have civil society, and there are many listening in here, like you, Sehad, and many other colleagues, and we thank you for what you're doing. But you also need religious leaders. Sometimes they shy away from these topics, thinking this one is for medical people, this one. But menstruation is a God-made thing. So religion should also talk about it. They should smartly address it in their sermons. They should also address it in their many programs, because we know they have programs out there fighting drug abuse, fighting the crime of all sorts. There should also be among their programs issues to do with drug abuse. But I also want to call upon cultural leaders to also play their part, because most of the norms that actually bring the stigma on menstruation arise from cultural teachings, cultural beliefs. I think it's high time we kept thinking that menstruation is a bedroom issue, and we bring it to the public for the sake of allowing our girls to grow, menstruate with dignity, be able to complete school, and be able to live in this world comfortably. If we had time, I would mention that statistics indicate that a girl at menstruation may miss between 3 to 5 days in a month if she's not supported of school. Because then if she has no pads, if she has no tampon, if she has no menstrual cup, then it means she may stay home because she can't get embarrassed at school. Those are 4-5 days off the term, and the month, and the term has 3 months. If 5 days off for every month, those are 15 off a term of 90 days. If it's for the whole year now, those are 45 days, which is almost a whole term lost by one girl. The more reason we should wake up and all of us get involved in this discussion and continue the advocacy around it. I am so sorry, I must leave. But
Wow.
I'm
Mr. Semakula, before you leave,
Mm.
we really appreciate and I love the mathematics that you're giving. However, you've been indicating to us that you have a national WASH symposium, and you indicated to us that you have done a lot in terms of ensuring that you provide pads together with partners. But there's been a question that we think that a person from the government should be able to get to ask. The efforts that we have are efforts, but menstruation will not stop until the person has gone into menopause. So in terms of sustainability, one of the things that has come through the spaces we've had is an issue of local production, especially for areas that are still struggling, including Karamoja and Teso regions. And we wanted to hear from you. If we went the local production way, to have a company owned up by the government would not really get into the challenges that we're having today and keep girls in school. What's your take on this? And this is the last question, I swear.
Thank you very much. You indeed asked my take. My take is that I've had discussions to that very proposal you are making, almost in different fora, including the very symposium I've talked about. It's high time government woke up, because we are talking of taxation. If they can't really reduce the taxes, can't we have a facility by government to provide at a very substandard cost? That is a voice coming out so strongly. We have actually sent that voice through the MPs on the forum on water, sanitation and hygiene, and we are sure they'll continue to pursue it, because indeed we cannot afford to continue waiting for donors to give us. I mentioned Global Fund, for example. Donors are also getting fatigued, by the way. And what we are all seeing, most of us, including you, civil society, is that there's also dwindling support. So I hear your voice loud and clear. Government should wake up, put up facilities to make these pads locally and subsidize the cost at that level so that our young people can get them. But I want also I remember the council asking whether we have a strategy. Indeed, we have the strategy, and we developed that national menstrual hygiene strategy through a concerted effort. It was many partners involved, but it all began with a national survey of menstrual hygiene management issues in different districts, where we went to find things around norms, around products, around practices, and so on, and that informed the National Menstrual Hygiene Management Strategy, which we are also.
Mr. Samakula, are you still with us? Hello?
And I was winding up to. Hello, Nulu.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I was on and I had wound up.
Please, thank you so much, Mr. Semakula. It would be nice to have a copy of the National Menstrual Hygiene Management Strategy to just see how it looks like. We really appreciate you for really speaking to us on what the ministry is saying. So clearly, Mr. Semakula has requested to leave for another meeting, and we allow him because he has given us extra 14 minutes, but I hope that much of what he had to tell us, I have tried to ask the questions that he should have asked if I had opened up. So, Mr. Semakula, I will let you go and appreciate you. For purposes of recap to the listeners, I'll just recap that Mr. Semakula spoke about the symposium that is happening today, the National Wash Symposium, which is an annual event. He has spoken to us about what they're doing, including providing basic requirements and minimum standards and conversations around involvement of men. And I want to bring back Seth because when Seth was starting to speak, he first spoke about the question that he was posed, that why did we bring men for this conversation and not the women? You know, we are the ones that go through this challenge every single day. But one of the things that we look out for is the male involvement. Why? Because within the regions where we work, the key challenges that we have on gender-based violence arising from menstrual hygiene, arising from women being in the periods and, the men beating them up. So perhaps it's a time that we bring you on board and have this conversation around it. So I'll say kudos to Sehad for thinking about that. But Seth, speaking about Sehad, we really want to find out some of the interventions that your organization is doing to advocate for friendly environments around menstrual hygiene management. Over to you, Seth. Seth, you're there? Seth, you're muted.
Oops, sorry, I was speaking while I was big shell. But thank you so much, and I'm glad that I was privileged to be part of the begin. Maybe this is just a recap of the series that we've gone through. But under SEHAD, we have indeed designed interventions, including a whole project that focuses on, bringing up those community voices and community challenges in some of the hard-to-reach areas or some of the rural areas in this country, like Karamoja, they already spoke about. And I was privileged to be part of the initial conversation as we started this campaign that looked at our interventions in terms of digging up the issues and also bringing them to the national level. So what SEHAD does through an approach is to utilize the voices that come through the community and bring them, like we have seen today, speaking to national level stakeholder like the ministry and the policymakers like MPs, etc., and the ministries to see to it that whatever happens on the ground has a channel or has a pipeline to the policy making table. Those voices come up, and that is our intention as SEHAD to see that from the discussions in Parliament are relevant based on the issues that we bring up through the community. So we also do targeted policy analysis to judge the gaps, but we also do the research for interventions that are happening and bringing up the challenges that are affecting. I'm glad Mr. Semakula already highlighted some of them, like the harmful culture norms. I was shocked to learn about a new one today about the banning of menstrual products as being termed as banning of children by some. But yeah, that is some of those things that we need to amplify, that when you learn about it, then what can you do about it from wherever you are. Yeah, I'll maybe, Noor, I'll just call upon my colleague Calvin. I'm sure he's on the call to just buttress what we've been discussing.
Sure. Thank you so much, Seth. So I think I just need to again add that the spaces have been part of those things that we've been doing to make sure that we're participating in the Menstrual Hygiene Month, but also working with partners to kind of occupy the advocacy spaces and have conversations around menstruation and engagements, especially in Karamoja and Teso regions, together with our partners, Wetunge Healthy. So I want to bring on to Calvin Mochebe. And I indicated that Calvin is a law student who is also a champion for mental health. And we want to hear from Calvin on what you think is an extent to which young people feel are involved in the policy making space, especially around menstrual hygiene products and education. Calvin?
I just want to correspond whether I can be heard clearly.
Very loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Noor. I've had several problems with my device, so I'll be using the co-host's device for this case. I would like to thank Sehad and everyone else and the previous discussants for this very meaningful discussion around menstrual health management and all that. Now, first in specific regard, it's only sad that Mr. Semakula has gone, but I come with a few key concerns of my colleagues, the young persons, especially with regards to menstrual health and the current stance. The young people want to know, number one, is the ministry right now ready to lobby and advocate along with civil society organizations for better or more affordable menstrual products? Number two, they want to know the ministry's stance and the cabinet stance on subsidization of menstrual products, largely due to the fact that they remain inaccessible, they remain unaffordable, and for many sectors of the population, they had much rather do with the reusable sanitary towels, which a certain member of cabinet looked at as a very contentious issue, which would not be supported by cabinet. But in specific answering to your question, no, the young people, more than ever, are ready to participate in any conversation with regards to menstrual hygiene. In this conversation, we want to make sure that the voices, especially in prioritization of issues to do with menstrual hygiene, tackle issues to do with young persons, especially those in school. For example, we see the effort, though many of us were not alive, but the very big effort government did in eradication of HIV. And to this date, even at campus, in various campuses in Uganda, there are dispensers for condoms. Why aren't these services then extended towards people or towards persons who have menstrual challenges or towards young girls in provision of menstrual products? So more than ever before, we see that the priorities then need to be realigned, especially when you look at various facets, for example, of our national budget, where we see a bit of wasteful expenditure. It might not be cherry picking, but it's important to remember that menstruation is inalienable and it is inherent upon every woman, that at a certain stage in their life, they are bound to undergo menstruation. And as a result, then, we need government to prioritize. It is what the youth are saying, it's what the young people are saying. And more than ever before, we need not go back to the retrogressive practices or the somehow entrenched discussion of this is a bedroom discussion, it must not be done by people at such a young age. No. Because the more we shelve this discussion, the more we do not speak out about it, very many young girls are affected because it's linked to their ability to access school. It's linked to their ability to access valuable social effects because of the stigmatization associated with children or school-going children or young persons who undergo menstruation, even in an adult age. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. Speaking about young people, do you, with all honesty, feel that your voice is heard as a young person when it comes to menstrual hygiene management?
Perhaps that question needs a bit of characterization. Do I feel that my voice is heard? I do not feel like my voice is sought in the first place. We do not feel that the voices are sought in the first place. It means that before we say whether we are heard or not, we must first ask ourselves, have they been given the platform for their voices to be heard? Part of this must be done even before a meaningful discussion is had. Are we able to then ask these people and say, okay, in part of these earlier strategies we had adopted, could we move our way significantly from them in pursuit of menstrual hygiene management and sexual reproductive health? So I feel that the voices are not heard, but it's largely due to the fact that there is no opportunity for the voices to be heard. Because one thing about the young generation is they are not shy to speak. And more than ever before, we know that if given that platform, they will be heard.
Great, Calvin. Then how do you think that these voices should be sought and heard in the drafting of policies, especially around menstrual hygiene management?
Oh, thank you. So how to seek young people and consensus from young people is different. The age-old practice has been to cherry pick a few young persons and extract them from their social setting and then take them to where the policymakers are. But we need the policymakers, first of all, to come and observe them in their natural setting. Before you say that reusable sanitary towels are not good enough to be adopted, come and see the person who does not even have access to food or to lunch. So number one, the first step to hearing or giving them an ability for their voices to be heard, come observe in their natural setting. But then also involve the discussion around menstruation in extracurricular activities. It is different from when you come and say, today is the day, let's speak about menstruation. But involve them in extracurricular activities. When the students have competitions, send out dossiers, send out documentation. If the students have debate, send it out. If it's in the new curriculum, send a discussion around that. I think the government did quite a good job of that under the PSA program, Presidential Initiative on AIDS Strategy for Youth. So, if at all that can then be done, you're seeing that it is a multi-pronged approach. Other than saying, let's pick 2 Calvins and take them to Parliament, and believe it or not, they will represent the rest. That's organically will not speak to the true voices of the young person.
Thank you, Calvin. Calvin. So I want to hear from you as a boy now. As a boy child, as a man, we have been questioned why these conversations are being spoken about by the men. But what do you think is your role in supporting menstrual hygiene management? And I think the same thing came through Mr. Semakula again when he said involvement of men in these conversations is key. But what is your role? Calvin.
Thank you so much, Noor. First of all, it is important to note, we will take notice of the fact that it is not disputed. A conversation around menstruation more than ever before needs, first of all, in the first capital letters, involvement of the women. In fact, their voices will always supersede the male voice. But I will coin the statement of one of my friends whenever we are discussing, and she keeps saying, Doreen, that if we keep doing what we are doing, we'll keep getting what we are getting. We do not want to reach a certain level where we are like, oh, let's now onboard more. It is better that at the ground discussion as it's being had, we are able to attack stigmatization at the root of it. Because it is going to be a zero-sum game if at all, number one, these boys do not know that they play a crucial role in psychosocial support of the girls as they are going through menstruation. Because not only are these boys now classmates to these people, not only are they village mates, or not only are they town mates, but much later they are going to be the fathers, the brothers. When menstrual health management education is being instilled into children, it must be done regardless of sex. The focus must be on girls, especially to do with how they will manage themselves, how to keep neat hygiene. But inclusivity must happen, because then and only then will we make sure that in the future, when the boys are now fathers, when they are now brothers with their sisters, they can extend the voice of menstrual health management. In disseminating communication about menstrual health, and you're in a school, speak to boys and girls alike. Because when that boy then goes back to his hometown, he might be the one sharing the information to then those girls that are not available. About the role I play a role, number one, of psychosocial support. Number one, I play a role as a citizen of the country. I can actively lobby, push all stakeholders, regardless of my sex and gender, to make sure that menstrual health management is prioritized in schools as a government policy, but that more than ever before, we make sure that any health strategy, especially in schools and by the ministry, addresses the obligations that the government has undertaken to make sure that the girls, young women of this country have sexual reproductive health. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. You have really supported us in painting the picture. And indeed, I think it was important that we engage the men in this particular conversation. So I want to open up the spaces to have a meaningful discussion with all of you. We still have Faith and Calvin on call. Mr. Semakula had requested to leave at 6, but we got a glitch and started at 5:30, and we could really understand 6:20 had to leave. So I'll open up. I've seen Maiga, I think, wants to speak. I think that someone has to send a request. Oh, okay. So, Maiga, are you in position to unmute and speak?
I am in
Because
position, but I'm in position, but I'm going to request that you maybe give other friends to go ahead. I'll speak in later because I'm still doing something small here. Kindly, but I'm following the conversation.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll open up again. I'll really open up. Let me see if there's any request. Open up to us. Do you have questions around the law? Do you have questions? I think what has come through is the law, the role of men, and what the ministry or the government is doing So you have questions around that. We are happy to take them on and we will have responses to them. All could be an experience. And as we wait for people to speak, I think today is the last day of the campaign on menstrual hygiene. The request is for people to have a video. Faith, are you able to speak to that? Maybe I give Faith a minute to speak to the campaign closure and what is up for grabs. So Faith.
Okay, so a good evening to everyone on here. Thank you so much for sparing time to join the conversation since they started. So today was the grand finale for our spaces, and to close our campaign in a more fun way, we posted out a post that is moving on our social media pages about an innovation challenge of how can you craft a sanitary towel, how do you use it, and then other people, then after you share it to us through the number that is on there. So that what should be in the video is you record a 3-minute video illustrating how to make and use a menstrual product, and ensure that in your video you show how this product is affordable, effective, comfortable, good absorbance, and easy to maintain. Initially, the earlier post had the deadline was today, but today we put out another post that shows that the deadline has been extended to tomorrow. So we urge all of you to participate. It is open to everyone, men and women, girls and boys, in any way. There is a prize awaiting on the winner, and we shall just announce as soon as possible on whoever will be the winner of the challenge. So we urge you all to participate. It is open across the country. Just share the video, share the link of the post to all your constituencies and other people, so that we have a meaningful participation across the country. Thank you so much.
And may the winner take it all. Thank you, Faith. So I hope I have questions. If I don't have questions, I don't think anyone is having an issue to discuss. Looks like they are all okay. So as we wait for another 1 minute for Robbins to get ready, I will call the speakers to give us their call to action, and I'll start with Faith. Please give us your call to action.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Noor, for the moderation. Well, my call to action is really about participation to the policymakers to ensure that whatever they do is really participatory. As my colleague Calvin was discussing, it reminded me of one of the judgments that we received recently on, I think, the AHA, and not even about the human rights issues around the challenging of that law, but because in its judgment, the court underlooked people's participation and replaced it effectively with representation. In other words, the constitutional court, in which we always believed, has said that once you vote and you have an MP or a representative at any level, then you no longer have a voice. That's what that decision is saying, that once you have an MP in Parliament, then you do not have a voice. You don't have a right to be consulted on anything to do with governance or issues concerning you. That is very problematic reasoning. I have seen a writer calling it vote or CDK, but vote or CDK really, it's absurd, because we know that the politicians will go into the space and then just push a whole different agenda, and probably the time they are supposed to be in the communities gathering voices, they are only there maybe for burials and, politicking around to sustain their presence in the seats of power. So my call to action really is that when the policies are being developed, government must be intentional on wide and meaningful and inclusive consultations to ensure that we have laws and policies in place that respond directly in the context specific issues that affect us as Ugandans. Whether we will have, because that will solve the challenge of, we've many times said that we have so many laws and they're difficult to implement because sometimes the provisions there are really abstract. They don't speak to the needs. So let's have that. I think if that's done for me, it will be really enough. And I already talked about Sehad's work in bringing up some of these issues. Mr. Semakula said, civil society, what are you doing? I mean, we can only do so much. We contribute to the role of the government, but we don't replace the role of government in service provision and, ensuring that everyone is well at whatever level they are. So government has to be very intentional on doing its job and, not calling on different duty bearers here and there. Yeah, that's my call to action. No, thank you so much.
Thank you, Faith. Robbins, are you still ready to speak to us? Mr. Maega? Okay, we'll go to Calvin. Calvin, what's your call to action?
Okay, thank you so much, Noor. My call to action is specifically one towards the entire community meaning the young people like myself, the policymakers, but also the general Ugandan community. Number one, we are calling for awareness in and out of schools. We need to integrate sexual reproductive education to the young persons. Parents, we need to do it. This should not be a fear discussion. Those of us who are in these communities, the leaders in the communities, persons of influence on social media platforms, we need to put the government to action to make sure that there is specific measures done or policies done to address this. And then we need to call on the government. Now, this call to action is to government for a review of the taxation system around sanitary products and menstrual products, or an outright removal of these taxes. If not, they can even set up import substitution industries. The strategies are so many that can be adopted by government to work to this. But lastly, there needs to be coordination from both the religious, cultural, and local perspective to make sure that there is a better understanding of menstruation, to reduce negative perceptions around it, such that our young girls and the women can live in a society in which they can benefit and live a much better life with better quality. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the listeners, and thank you so much to the panelists this evening. So I'll cause this space to end. Thank you.